I think there's one specific trait that is most important in becoming a senior developer. Let me tell you what it is. What's up, everyone? My name is James Quick, and I do weekly videos on web development related topics. And in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about careers and what you need to do to become a senior developer. And I became a senior developer when I was at FedEx. I became an architect. So actually, I went a level above that. And I have a senior title now in my role at Auth0. And I've kind of spent some time reflecting on what does that actually mean? A lot of people want to know, how do I get to that next level? How do I progress? And it's really come down to one important thing. But I want to start with a quote here. And this is from Amy Knight. And this is an interview she did on one of the Microsoft channels. I'll have a link to this, the Microsoft developer channel. I'll have a link to this video below. But she says at some point in her career, she went from code that works to code that a team can use. And this, to me, I think is the epitome of what I had come to think of as the number one trait. So I'll tell you what that trait is. That trait to me for a senior developer is to be able to turn a complex problem into smaller, simpler ones. Breaking down that really tough, kind of intimidating problem into some chunks that are manageable and understandable. And I'll add one extra caveat to this. So maybe it's two traits, but I think it kind of goes in one. It's being able to break down those complex problems into smaller ones and then also communicate that. When she said code that works to code that a team can use, you have to be able to communicate. You can't just be so smart and so sophisticated with the code that you write that people that are newer can't understand it. You have to be able to communicate to that, to your team as well. And I want to tell you, like, I'll show you a code example of this in a second, but I want to tell you a story of when I started at FedEx. And when I started at FedEx as my first full-time software development job, I'd worked at Microsoft for several years, but didn't write code on a daily basis. So I started at FedEx and I was trying to kind of learn the source code of the project that I was looking in. And I realized I was going if I was trying to figure out one piece of functionality, I was going from function call to another class, another file, another function call, another class, another 10 function calls that were all chained together. And I remember thinking wow, this is really intimidating. There's a ton going on here. But I didn't really appreciate at the time how well this solution was broken out. It was broken into those many different files for a very specific reason. And that reason was because these functions, if you've heard this before, these functions did one thing. These classes had one responsibility and they were organized in a way that individually they made sense. And now you just have to kind of piece them together. And I look at how that could have been a fairly complex problem and gotten to that point where it's broken out really well. And kind of another level of this is after a year or so, we decided to rebuild an application from scratch. And I remember thinking about this senior developer who was basically creating the majority of the code to start this thing out for us. And he had his ideas of his classes, his interfaces, what functionality was going to go where, because he was able to break that stuff down and then communicate that to us as well when we had questions. Now, one of the interesting things for me, kind of a turning point in my career, was as I got more comfortable in my knowledge and the code base and things like that, I started to kind of question things that were going on. And I think that's really important, not in a disrespectful way, but being able to speak up, ask those questions, and also say, hey, why is it this way instead of that way? Or wouldn't this other way have these other benefits? And I think I earned a lot of respect from my team of not only being able to execute on what we were trying to do, but also asking those questions and not being afraid to challenge people to say, is this really the best thing, or are there alternative routes that we can go? So that was a little bit of my experience at FedEx of working with senior developers and then eventually becoming one myself. Again, the number one trait here is to turn a complex problem break it down into a bunch of smaller, simpler ones that everyone can understand. So let me show you a little bit of a piece of code, a good example of the benefits of breaking down your code into smaller problems. All right, so I'm inside of what is actually the source code behind the Compressed FM website. So Compressed FM is the podcast that I run with my co-host, Amy Dutton, and this is the code behind the website. And I just wanted to show how well broken out all of this stuff is, because you look at, there's tons of files in here, right? And this can be really intimidating when, especially as a new developer, you join a project and there's hundreds of files. Maybe it's really hard to kind of internalize that and kind of understand it. But I think it was really important, and this was a sign to me of how well done this stuff was, of being able to break these things out into different places. So if you start, this is a Next.js project. It's not super important what it is. But under pages, we have all of our different individual pages. And then some of these have like nested pages. So there would be like slash dashboard, slash guest, slash sponsor, that sort of stuff. Then we have our API. This is our API routes. And then we have our different modules. So inside of like the about page, for example, here's the about page. Here are the different components that go with this about page. And so I like how this is broken out into very clean modules where you have this page here as well. Now you'll notice if we go down back to the pages, we also have an about.js here. But the thing is that this thing will do kind of the queries. So it will kind of specifically focus on the queries and then display a little bit of information, but really what it displays is the actual about page itself. So it grabs the information and then passes that information along to the about page. Now this is just kind of a random example, but the opposite of that would be to throw all this code into one file and have it be really big and unclean. And so she was able to break down and look at like, here are the different things that we're going to have, break those into a nice folder structure for everyone to be able to follow and understand, and then have this like separation of concerns of what components are doing what. Same thing, same idea with functions. Functions should do one thing and you should split them out so that each one only does one thing. So I think this is, to me, this is a sign of a senior developer being able to take like, here's the bigger project that we want to have. Here's the product that we want to be able to build in the end. What different components am I going to have and how do I break those out into ways that are really clean and easy to follow? And that to me is a symbol of, or is the number one symbol of a senior developer. And going back to the quote from Amy Knight that we read at the beginning of this, going from code that works to code that a team can use and being able to communicate that to the team, I think is really important. So that is my number one trait of a senior developer. I'm curious what you think your number one trait would be of a senior developer. Let me know in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like it, subscribe to the channel, check out more content. In the meantime, thanks for watching.